it is my pleasure to introduce the co-founder and director of Longview School in Brewster, New York. And he's been doing this for the past 21 years. And he and the teachers there have been continuously working to adapt the model to optimize student-directed learning. He's been a presenter at many other conferences. He's presented many times here at AERO. He's been a longtime AERO friend and supporter and a great human. And without further ado, Mark Jacobs. Mark, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone. As Peter said, I'm the director and co-founder of Longview School. We're a very small private school. We tend to have between 25 and 35 students. We're currently a 5th through 12th grade program, and we're located in Brewster, New York, just an hour north of New York City. Although I'm not here to tell you predominantly about our program, I just would like to start by saying a little bit about what we do. We are a democratic school. We spent 9 years as a Sudbury school, and we were a pretty traditional Sudbury school for those 9 years. Then we moved, and there was a local progressive school that closed, and we absorbed their students, and their families didn't know anything about Sudbury education, self-directed education. So we adapted our model in order to accommodate that a little bit and created its 2-track model where we have a self-directed track, which we used to call the Sudbury track, and an academic track. And we kept a lot of the structures of Sudbury education. So that's just a little bit of what the school is like, and that tells you a little bit about my educational philosophy, but that is not what we are going to be talking about today. Today, we are going to be talking about the future. I love voice things. All right, of course, none of us actually has a crystal ball, and yet human beings cannot help but look ahead. I've taught a high school elective course, which is pretty popular, called Futurology, where we do our best to imagine the future in a range of different areas, from technology to human rights. In this talk, we're going to be considering one aspect of the future of technology in education. Before we get started, though, I want to ask just one little thing of you, which I like to think of as the impossible. I would like you to withhold judgment. Notice I said withhold judgment. I promise that you'll be able to judge later, but it's typically a good policy to understand first and judge later. That way, you at least fully understand what you're judging. There's another reason to withhold judgment. What I'll be discussing tonight is at least part of the future of education, whether you like it or you don't like it. There's a long history of people not adapting to new technology. Instead, there's a tendency to reject the new and predict how it will result in the downfall of society. Let's play a little game. Everyone knows how to use the chat, right? I'll put up a quote and you tell me what it is referring to. Here we go. The free access which many young people have to blank has poisoned the mind and corrupted the morals of many a promising youth and prevented others from improving their minds in useful knowledge. All right. What do you think? What's that referring to?
Stones and anvils.
You guys are too smart for me. You wrote books. This is a quote from the Reverend Enos Hitchcock in 1790. And basically, it referred to literature, romances, novels, and plays. All right, so you guys are good. Let you try one more. Here's another one. A pernicious excitement to learn and play blank has spread all over the country. Blank is a mere amusement of a very inferior character, which robs the mind of valuable time that might be devoted to nobler acquirements, while it affords no benefit whatever to the body. What do we have? Jazz, music, good. Come on, there are a bunch of people out there. Throw some guesses.
Chess.
This was a quote from an article in the well-respected magazine Scientific American in 1859. And as Jerry said, good Gehal, it is referring to chess. Okay, so what's the point? It's only human to judge what is new and unknown. But those things often turn out to be positive in unexpected ways. So I urge you to at least keep an open mind and withhold your judgment for as long as you can. Then we'll get to the Q&A and you can reapply your judging mind. I promise. Let's begin. The pandemic was world-changing for education. COVID-19 changed the way we did education. It created a transformation that could never have happened so quickly and so thoroughly as any legislation or change in educational philosophy. One day we were teaching kids in schools, and the next day there was Zoom. Actually, there was a fork in the road. On one side was asynchronous learning. For this, teachers provided content that the students could access in their own time and complete at their own pace. Now, anyone who was a part of that, how did that work out? Not so well. Don't get me wrong, some students did okay. They had the executive function skills to get the work done and even to learn a few things. But in general, asynchronous learning, at least on the K-12 level, failed. So what about the other side of the fork? That was teaching by Zoom or Google Meet or whatever platform you used. All of these are forms of synchronous learning, where the teacher is interacting with the students in real time. So how did that work? Better, but not much better. Actually, it worked pretty well in my school, but I have classes of 3 to 7 kids. Plus, we democratically decided that all students would be required to have their cameras on. I had a bank of computers to support our teachers in dealing with all the snafus of technology as they arose. I got to redesign my classes so that they were broken down into small chunks, each with interactive components, and students kept learning. Still, the best I can say about Zoom learning is that it is less than optimal. But the struggles of education during the pandemic did get me and a lot of other people thinking about what's next. I mean, I am a futurologist, so I consider it part of my role in life to anticipate and help bring about a better future. So, what will education, or at least part of education, look like in 10 or 20 years? And what can we do to help the education of the future be as good as it can be? These questions have led me past asynchronous assignments, past Zoom classes, into virtual reality. I know, stay with me. In some ways, I've been envisioning this for over 20 years. As a philosopher, which is truly what I am, I've always been fascinated by Robert Nozick's experience machine thought experiment. Feel free to look it up. I'm not going to go into the details here. I actually wrote a full-length play that considered some of the ideas underlying that thought experiment. And then I saw the movie Ready Player One. Okay, I know it's a book. Since then, I read the book by Ernst Klein. How many of you are familiar with the book or the film? Here's a little snippet to remind you about the futuristic technology Klein was writing about. Now, let me know if the sound works.
He showed us that we could go somewhere without going anywhere at all. You don't need a destination when you're running on an omnidirectional treadmill.
Raise it a little bit if you can.
Something underlay. James Halliday saw the future.
The sound is a little bit low. I don't know if you can raise it up.
Place to go. A place called the Oasis.
That's about as loud as it goes.
This is the Oasis. It's a place where the limits of reality are your own imagination. You can do anything. Go anywhere. Like the Vacation Planet. Surf a 50-foot monster wave in Hawaii. You can ski down the pyramids. You can climb Mount Everest.
Now you have to remember, this is not a two-dimensional video game. This Oasis provides an immersive experience involving at least 3 out of your 5 senses: sight, hearing, and touch. And 5 out of 5 senses by the second book in the series, if you get to read Ready Player 2. If you only saw the movie, then you missed one of the most interesting aspects of life in the Oasis: school. Here's what it looked like. Hey, it's playing it again. Sorry, no pictures, no images from the movie, no illustrations or fan art from the book, nothing. A little description, but basically only hints at the possibilities. So what happened next for me? I bought my son an Oculus Quest.
Meet Quest 2. The powerful next step in our VR evolution.
He loved it for about 2 weeks. And then it sat on the shelf until I borrowed it from him during the pandemic. My mind was blown, not by what it was, but by what it could be. And that's when my imagination went into hyperdrive. A lot has happened since then. Longview, my school, applied for and received a grant. Oh, I keep playing things twice. Thanks to the Vela Education Fund, we were able to buy 8 Oculus Quest 2 headsets, hire some extra staff, and run a virtual reality, I'm just going to call it VR from now on, a VR after-school program. This was an opportunity for us to get the technology and start to get comfortable with it. That is crucial. Consider the evolution of technology. Now, almost all of us have smartphones, and they are an integral part of our lives. If you're younger and are fortunate enough to be able to afford a smartphone, then guaranteed you're fluent with it. You are a digital native. But what's next? VR natives. But for us, VR immigrants, we are learning the technology and not just envisioning its future implications, but starting to put it in place. Next school year, I'm going to hold at least 25% of my history classes, I teach history at my school, in VR. For now, all the students will be in our brick and mortar building using our Oculus Quest 2 headsets in our gym. I'd like to show you a little bit of what that will look like. Now, I wish I could have all of you put on a headset and experience the immersion of VR firsthand. Of course, that's not possible. And so I've done the next best thing. I recorded in 2D some of what our students will be immersed in. Let me show you a video of me giving a VR tour of my virtual classroom to a Longview teacher, Raphael, and Longview student and intern, Nick. I apologize in advance for the shakiness of the video. That's not how it feels when you experience it firsthand. Let's take a look. I'm hoping you can hear this. You may have to turn your sound up a little higher. Hello and welcome to my classroom. Hello, Nick. Hello, Raphael. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Mark. Yeah. Hi. Hello.
Hello. Well, this is my classroom space in Engage, and I invite you to come in, take a look around. You'll notice that I have comfortable seating set up for everybody. So you can see that I put a map on the wall of the United States since I'm a history teacher and I'm teaching American history this coming year. On the back, I put a logo for Longview School, and I have a clock inserted here. I always like to teach from the front of the room with a clock so I can keep track of time for myself. And if you guys come have a seat, you can sit down in these chairs here, and you can see that I could talk to you and present to you from this podium just like I was giving a lecture. Of course, I don't like to do a lot of lecture as a teacher, but I do like to lead discussions and use a lot of interactables. So this space is set up for some interaction. For instance, on my left, you can see the screen. And with the screen, I can easily import videos that I have set up ahead of time. I could search for a video now, but it's better to use a video that I had set up beforehand. So here is an ad for the Oculus.
This is Oculus
Quest
the groundbreaking all-in-one headset that brought VR into the homes of so many people.
And I can then open up a tablet using my left controller, and I'm able to pause and play the video from my tablet. So I can easily stop it and allow discussion to happen amongst the students. And when I'm done with it, I can simply eject the content and it goes back to the screen that was before. Now, you'll also notice that I have a whiteboard over here, and this whiteboard is something that I could use and I could write on. So I end up with a stylus and I can choose the color that I want for my writing, and I can then write words and letters up on the board, and that's pretty easy to do. Yes, thank you. But you will notice that my handwriting is somewhat terrible. So I sort of feel like using a whiteboard for a lot of notes or content doesn't work that well. Luckily, there's an even easier thing to use, and those are called notes. They're sort of like sticky notes. And it's easy to have pre-written some sticky notes, then you just create it and import it, and you are able to manipulate it as an object, and you're able to move it in space, and you're able to make it bigger, however you would like, and then you can leave that sticky note out there. And now we have an object that we can interact with, and we could talk about, or it could be notes on content. Here it is sticky note propaganda. I type neater than I write. I have some more sticky note propaganda as well. Sticky note 2, which I can import for fun. I will make it a different color, and I can create the sticky note. And here we have another note. Sticky notes let me prepare ideas in advance. So these are two advantages for using sticky notes and ways that they could be used in the classroom. So this video shows an interesting replication of the classroom experience. You have all the same elements: a screen to show movies, a whiteboard to write on, even more of a smartboard to add pre-prepared content. And schools like ours can't afford smartboards. The students have the headsets on, so they are fully immersed. You have their attention. But replication of a classroom is not enough. How about field trips? Check out this very short video to learn a little more about field trips in VR.
It's also nice that you're not limited to the classroom. This is a real advantage of virtual reality, is that you can take field trips to places and feel totally immersed in a location. So we're going to do that first by using a 360 video. This is a YouTube 360 video. I'm going to go over here and I am going to go on a field trip, and then I'm going to invite Raphael and Nick to walk through the gleaming circle, and we're going to go into just a dark space at first. So hop right in, and I'll go in as well. Okay, and here we are in this space, and now I'm going to load the media of the 360 video, and this is something I've saved ahead of time. And here we are in a video with the Mars rover. So now this is interesting. This is recorded video content. And here we are in the space. The video is going on. We can't directly interact with it, but I, as the teacher, could teach a lesson in a location, or we could be in a 360 video where the person in the video is providing content to us and telling us about what they're doing while they're doing it in a place that would be impossible for us to go to as a class.
So imagine having an astronaut or an astrophysicist talking to your class in a recorded 360 video, where the expert is teaching the students through a recording. And then when that's done, we can go back to the virtual classroom, discuss what we've heard, do interactives to follow-up activities that the teacher has designed. There's another type of field trip you can take in VR. You can go to a pre-made educational interactive space. Take a look at this video.
Welcome to the Amistad. This is a Cuban slave ship. And you may have heard of the movie. There was a whole movie about the events that took place here. But this is a way to learn about the history. Took place in the mid-1800s. The year now, at this moment in time, is 1839. We can learn about it by my lecturing to you about it, but there's also preloaded content. So we can just go over to this place where it has a 1 and listen.
My name is Saint Bay, PA. But in the United States, I was known as Joseph C. I had a happy life in Eastern Africa until one very bad day.
And there's more to that, but I'm just giving you a little excerpt. And if we go down a little bit towards the front of the ship, we should be able to get down into the hold, follow the blood trail, and get a little bit more. This gives us another very immersive experience. You can hear the sounds of the ship. You can see how the slaves were transported in such terrible conditions. And again, you can click the audio to get a little more information.
Once it took fun, we were so like comic box stuff.
So this is an excellent way to present history content in an immersive.
So I've shown you my virtual classroom. I've shown you how we can use 360 videos and virtual spaces for immersive field trips. But this is just a few of the educational opportunities that are available. There are apps which have been designed to either teach or reinforce educational content that are much more hands-on rather than just being immersive. I'll show you just two of them in this talk. This week, Raphael, Nick, and I demoed an app called Future Class, and it's a VR app for chemistry. Take a look at this interactive immersive experience. This is a balancing chemical equations lesson. And here you're going to see it. And there's a little sound from the gamification of it, but there's no talking. So you can see that we're using different elements in order to create balanced equations. It tells you when you're grabbing things with your hand.
Well done.
You're letting it know when you think you've solved it, and it's giving you feedback as that goes on.
Right on.
So that's one lesson. That's balancing chemical equations. Future Class has created a bunch of activities which correspond to lessons. Here's another example from the same app. This is a lesson on atomic bonds. So you can see going into the class, a little instruction at the beginning.
Welcome to the Chemical Bonds module. Pull the lever when you are ready to start. Let's create a covalent bond between two hydrogen atoms. Take an unpaired electron from the outer shell of both of the hydrogens and put them together. An ionic bond can only be formed between a metal and a... You created your first chemical bond. Now, let's see if the substance was created correctly. Pull the lever to check. Good. Let's try creating a covalent bond between two oxygen atoms. Notice that unlike with the hydrogen, each oxygen atom has two unpaired... You can only create a bond between two unpaired electrons. Great! You created a covalent double bond. The two created electron pairs are shared between both oxygen atoms. It's as if each of the oxygen atoms received two new electrons. In this state, both atoms have 8 electrons on their outer shell. This is the maximum number of electrons on the outer shell, which atoms try to achieve.
So you can see that these activities are highly interactive, hands-on, or at least virtually hands-on, and they have some gamification components. You want to achieve the tasks in order to move on to the next level. Not every app with a high level of educational value is designed for educational purposes. Here's an app which was designed simply as a game, but we're planning to use it in an engineering class. This is the last video excerpt I'm going to show you. It's called Gravity Labs.
In Gravity Lab, the purpose of the game is to get an item from one place to another using as few resources as possible. In the beginning, you start with simple boards. When you put these boards down, they create a natural pull force, but it's not strong enough to overcome gravity entirely. So you need to be careful, using just enough of an incline that you're able to overcome gravity slowly. Similarly, soon after, you get these inverters, which you can make float, heavy, or just the opposite of whatever they already are. So these guys fall to the floor, but with just a simple addition of this, they start floating. So our goal is to get from here to here with as few boards and inverters as possible. So while theoretically we could toss down all of these to get the perfect, effortless conveyor, you don't actually need all that much. We can just toss these to the side. Because we just really need these three, despite the difficulty that you might see. Because if you tilt them just right, you can get them to slide around until they're just here. And you might expect there might need to be a huge amount of force pushing it upwards. That's where the inverters come in. You press this, you click I want it to float, you place it here, and now all of a sudden it's just moving in all the way to the top.
You can see that this app, when combined with teacher guidance, can teach a range of science and engineering concepts. There are also games that can be used to develop critical thinking skills and resourcefulness. For example, there's a room VR, a dark matter, that's the name of the game. This is sort of like an escape room, and many of you may be familiar with escape rooms. It can be played individually or as a group, and if you do it as a group, then you're able to do team building and you're able to build skills in cooperation. If you want to use VR along with a film class or to explore storytelling, there's an app called Madrid Noir. This is actually a 45-minute mystery adventure in 2 acts. It's a VR film, which you're a part of and you even interact in, but you're a secondary character. It's not a video game where you're playing it to solve the mystery. Now, I could go on and on, giving you possibilities in almost every content area in a school curriculum. The possibilities that already exist are incredible, and the ones that will soon exist are limitless. That being said, our ability to implement this now does have some limits. Remember when I showed you my classroom and the ship, the Amistad? These exist in a program or app that's called Engage. The technology is so new, it is currently unclear what world or worlds in which program or programs will end up being the virtual space of the metaverse. I'll get back to the metaverse. Engage is one of those apps, and I'll probably primarily be using Engage next school year. But there are other options, good options, and one of these may end up developing the technology faster and more effectively, eventually eclipsing the others. Microsoft owns a quite interesting and viable alternative, AltSpace VR. I like a lot about this option, although it does make keeping others out of your virtual spaces, other than your students, a little more difficult. Another option is VR Chat. That program is owned by a much smaller company. They only have 36 employees, but it also has privacy issues and a pretty bad reputation because of the trolling that seems to happen all too often on that platform. Of course, Meta's Horizon Worlds is another option, although at this moment, it is the least developed of the 4. This leads into a question I only have time to address in a cursory manner, the metaverse. You hear this term all the time, but it can be difficult to know precisely what it means. According to one expert, in the broadest terms, the metaverse is understood as a graphically rich virtual space with some degree of verisimilitude where people can work, play, shop, and socialize. In short, do the things humans like to do together in real life, or perhaps more to the point, on the internet. In other words, the metaverse is one unified space where you'll interact through an avatar and do all sorts of activities. Sort of like these avatars going into a portal to go somewhere in the metaverse. Now, here's the problem. Right now, the technology lacks interoperability. There are lots of apps you can access, but each one requires you create a different avatar. So in a way, you lack a consistent identity in virtual reality right now. Some of the apps only allow one person, some two, some a group. Plus, you can't access the apps all from one place in a virtual world, like going through portals. And so a true metaverse is future technology, but it's near future technology. It's just around the corner. Now, to be fair, there are a bunch of challenges for VR education. To name just a few, there's a difficulty with people's learning curve. Both teachers and students will need to get comfortable using VR hardware and software. There's a challenge with developing content. Teachers will need to create lesson plans that work smoothly and are rich in educational value. There are limits to the immersiveness of the experience. For now, VR is predominantly a visual and audio experience. That being said, as the technology advances, there will be haptics, which means that you're able to feel things. When your phone vibrates, that's a haptic. And they are already producing, although they're a little bit more not accessible yet, gloves, vests, full body suits, where you feel what your avatar experiences. Also, there's an issue with movement. For now, movement is mostly with a joystick. You saw me in my classroom teleporting from place to place, or walking sometimes, but I was walking with a joystick. As omnidirectional treadmills, like we saw in the clip from Ready Player One, become available, then your movement in real life will be what moves your avatar in the metaverse. For now, though, it's incredible that by activating your sense of hearing and your sense of seeing, just how much your brain fills in the other senses. Finally, there's a challenge with access. The Oculus Quest 2 costs $300, which is not affordable for everyone, and newer technology may cost even more. There are also many advantages of VR education. To name just a few, there is a high level of engagement. Students tend to be fully engaged when in VR. This avoids many of the issues of classroom management that create problems for so many class activities. There is the highest level of safety in the most extraordinary of experiences. Students can have experiences in VR in total safety, whether it's piloting a plane or building a nuclear reactor. Students have access to experiences and places inaccessible otherwise. Classes can travel to places they could never afford to go to IRL, in real life. VR is incredibly egalitarian. Once the students have the basic VR headsets, students from all socioeconomic backgrounds can interact with the most sophisticated VR technology. If you compare the science labs, like compare that to what we have in public schools right now. If you compare the science labs of a public school located in a rich suburb to those of an inner city school, the difference is astounding. In VR, any student can do any science experiment. With technology, even wealthier schools don't have access to in real life. Beyond these advantages of VR education, there's one more, and it's a big one. What I have shown you today in this presentation are a lot of ideas about what VR education would look like if it built upon how we currently view schools. Let me give you an analogy. I think of it like the different ways to homeschool. When families choose to homeschool, some replicate school at home. They try to create an environment at home which is quite similar to school, covering similar content in similar ways with similar structures. Others homeschool in their own way. They unschool or they reinvent education, utilizing play and learning, changing scheduling and creating much more flexibility with time, learning from experts, going places, and many more ways. So for this analogy, in this talk, I've told you about how we might replicate traditional schooling in a virtual space. But the possibilities are much broader. Like many creative homeschoolers have done, we might create VR schools in radical new ways. How might virtual school buildings differ from traditional ones? How might we group students differently? What role would teachers or guides have with students? How would students be able to spend much more of their time in authentic learning activities? My actual vision of VR education is well beyond the VR classroom and field trips and apps I've shown you today. But right now, we are just at the beginning stage of developing these possibilities. So, wrapping up my presentation, I think it's essential to understand that trying to stop VR from expanding into gaming, into entertainment, into work is impossible. Trying to stop VR in education as well is like trying to stop a moving train with a car. It's not worth the time or the effort. It would be like trying to stop television or computers or smartphones. But we don't have to try to stop the train. We can climb aboard. What does climbing aboard look like? Having VR education be optimal for students in all areas, in academics, knowledge acquisition, skill development, soft skill enhancement, and even team development is possible. But it will take committed educators to make it happen. If we leave it to the textbook companies or the technology corporations, profit will supersede excellence. I intend to be part of nurturing the future, both IRL, in real life, and in VR. I hope that you will join me.